Hello, welcome. Before we begin, I want to know, where are you watching from? Leave your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how many corners of the world are watching us. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, take advantage now and click subscribe so you don't miss any scary stories, full of mysteries and twists that will keep you hooked from beginning to end. Today, get ready to enter the mansion of the restless spirits of the Winchester family, where dark secrets and unsettling presences await every brave visitor. The old Winchester mansion sat atop a hill, shrouded in a persistent mist that seemed to emanate from the very ground. The narrow, dusty windows reflected the pale light of dusk, casting shadows that seemed to move of their own. Those who passed along the winding road leading to the property avoided looking at the mansion for more than a few seconds, as if the mere act of gazing upon it would awaken unwanted memories of stories whispered for generations. The protagonist, Ethan Harper. He was a young investigative newspaper reporter known for not being intimidated by mysterious cases. Upon receiving an anonymous call about unexplained happenings at the mansion, his curiosity was instantly piqued. He knew that any investigation in that place would require courage, but what he couldn't foresee was the intensity of what he was about to uncover. On the other side, the mansion guarded its invisible guardian. The memoirs of a family marked by tragedies and mysterious deaths. Legend had it that the Winchester family had built the mansion out of obsession, trying to atone for ancient sins that no one dared mention. The family patriarch had disappeared without a trace decades ago, and rumors spoke of dark pacts and secrets buried in the foundations of the property. As Ethan walked through the rusty gate, he felt a strange sensation of being watched, as if each shadow was a silent gaze waiting for his reaction. As he walked down the main hallway, Ethan noticed the stark contrast between the mansion's grandeur and the decay imposed by time. Crystal chandeliers covered in cobwebs swayed gently, as if a non-existent breeze swept through the hall. Old portraits of the Winchester family, some with seemingly lifelike eyes, watched the young reporter's every step. Each room revealed subtle clues to an interrupted history. Worn furniture, open books with yellowed pages, and a palpable feeling that this place had been frozen in time. Early in his exploration, Ethan found the first indication of the inexplicable basement door, sealed for decades, but with recent scratches on the wooden edges. A rusty chain held the door closed, but small signs of strain suggested that someone or something had tried to open it. Ethan mentally noted every detail, knowing that this could be the starting point for the most challenging investigation of his career. As he explored the corridors, Ethan felt a growing presence. It was almost like a pulse in the air, following his steps. He heard faint noises, indistinct whispers, creaking wood, but each time he turned to look, there was no one there. It was as if the house itself breathed, maintaining a life of its own, fueled by memories and old pains. Each object seemed to tell a truncated story. Yellowed letters of lost loves, sealed diaries with censored words, photographs of children who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The feeling that the mansion was alive intensified with each step, and Ethan felt for the first time a genuine fear, not of what he could see, but of what he could not seeing, but feeling. In a side room, Ethan found the Winchester family library, a place where time seemed to have stood still. The tall, slanted bookshelves were filled with occult books, property inventory records, and personal diaries of ancestors. Leafing through one of them, Ethan noticed the nervous handwriting of someone trying to explain events beyond human comprehension. Apparitions, inexplicable noises, objects moving on their own. Each word seemed more like a warning than an account. He felt that the story he sought was there, hidden among those yellowed pages, but it would require courage to reveal. The contrast between Ethan and the mansion, this established the central conflict of the narrative, a man driven by rationality and curiosity versus a house that seemed to hold secrets of its own, resisting any attempt at intrusion. Each step the reporter took deepened the tension, revealing not only the mysteries of the mansion, but also testing his own perception of reality. The Winchester mansion was not merely a setting, it was an active, almost antagonistic force, shaping Ethan's actions and demanding that he confront his own deepest fears. The setting, the atmosphere, and the tension built up at the beginning prepare the reader for future events, unexpected encounters, disturbing revelations, and the constant feeling that something or someone is always watching. The mansion is not merely a physical space, it becomes a living entity. In this story, past and present collide, challenging Ethan to uncover the truth without losing his sanity. The town near the Winchester mansion seemed asleep, as if the presence of the hill and the mansion cast a shadow over the entire community. Small cobblestone streets snaked between old houses, closed cafes, and trees whose twisted branches resembled outstretched hands. The residents rarely spoke of the mansion, and when they did, their voices were low, as if they feared that mentioning the name might attract something unwanted. Ethan quickly realized that he was dealing not only with a house full of mysteries, but with a legacy that permeated the town itself. Inside the mansion, each room revealed layers of the Winchester world. The main kitchen, although deactivated for decades, the kitchen still contained rusty pots and utensils, and a long table, marked by scratches and old stains, hinted at gatherings that might have ended in intense discussions or whispered secrets. As he walked through it, Ethan felt that the space not only recorded actions, but absorbed emotions like anger, fear, and despair, keeping them alive in some invisible way. Among the secondary characters, there were Clara Whitmore. Clara, a local historian who was assisting Ethan with his investigation, possessed vast knowledge of the genealogy and obscure traditions of the Winchester family. Her presence served to deepen the narrative, offering subtle information about the culture of the time in which the mansion was built, without ever revealing everything at once. She mentioned, for example, that the mansion's construction followed unusual alignments with the terrain, as if it were designed not only for habitation, but also to contain forces that escaped human comprehension. Another important character was Marcus Gray. Marcus, a former family employee, was now a lonely old man who rarely spoke of the past, but who carried memories that could be the key to understanding the mysteries of the house. Each of his accounts, tinged with hesitation, added layers of tension. Ethan realized that Marcus feared what he remembered more than what might be to come, and this made each dialogue laden with meaning, even when silent or incomplete. The interior setting of the mansion, he also delved into this topic. The attic, for example, was full of sealed boxes and chests, some dating back more than 100 years. Yellowed labels indicated belongings of children who had mysteriously disappeared. Books that discussed occultism, and black and white photographs with faces that seemed to follow him with their eyes. Ethan noticed details that might go unnoticed by anyone else. Fine scratches on the walls, footprints in old sawdust, half-open doors that creaked as if they wanted to be opened by him. The town and the mansion were subtly connected. Local legends about the Winchester family, from cursed inheritances to dark pacts, were passed down orally, with different versions depending on who told the story. Ethan realized that the truth was fragmented, scattered among accounts, documents, and memories, demanding his knowledge, a careful, almost archaeological investigation to reconstruct the family's past. Each discovery not only clarified something, but also heightened the sense of danger and mystery. Furthermore, the city's atmosphere heightened the tension. Morning mists gathered over the land near the mansion, and the wind blew erratically across the fields, as if warning of something approaching. Small details, The shadow of a swiftly passing raven, doors slamming for no apparent reason, church bells ringing out of turn, created an oppressive environment needing no literal explanation. Ethan understood that every element of the world around him contributed to shaping his decisions and actions. This deeper exploration allowed the reader to understand the complexity of the story. The Winchester Mansion was not just a physical space, but a network of relationships, memories, and secrets that shaped the lives of those who dared to approach it. Ethan, Clara, and Marcus each became, in their own way, part of this world, and their actions would be crucial in unraveling the mysteries that the house insisted on keeping hidden. The contrast between Ethan's rationality and the historical and emotional weight of the environment creates fertile ground for the development of the central conflict. Each character, each object, and each street in the city contributes to the construction of a macabre universe, where past and present intertwine, and the danger lies not only in what is seen, but in what is felt, in what is sensed, and in what remains hidden. Ethan's investigation progressed, and with it, the feeling that the Winchester Mansion, I didn't want to be discovered. That night, as the moon emerged through dense clouds, the reporter returned to the sealed basement. The rusty chain that had previously seemed insurmountable was now partially open, as if someone had tampered with the lock in recent days. An intense chill ran down his spine, and each step he took toward the door echoed off the walls as if the mansion itself were watching his hesitation. As soon as the chain fell, Ethan pushed the door open with effort. The basement reeked of mold mixed with something indefinable, metallic and ancient, reminiscent of iron and damp earth. The darkness was almost absolute, and the beam of his flashlight illuminated only fragments of dust-covered objects, sealed boxes, broken furniture, and a worn carpet with stains that looked recent. But what really caught his attention was an old diary with a black cover and a broken lock, which exuded an aura of mystery. While flipping through the pages, Ethan discovered accounts of inexplicable experiences, nighttime voices calling names, shadows moving autonomously, objects disappearing and reappearing in different places. Each entry was dated and signed by different members of the Winchester family, indicating that the phenomena were not isolated, but they persisted through the generations. The feeling of being watched intensified. He heard light footsteps behind him, but when he turned around, there was nothing, only darkness and absolute silence. At that same moment, the tension increased with the entrance of Clara. She was holding antique lanterns, trembling slightly. She revealed that she had found documents at the local town hall about disappearances of residents in the area, temporally linked to the construction and expansions of the mansion. Each clue reinforced the idea that the Winchesters not only experienced personal tragedies, but they were catalysts for events that affected the entire community. Ethan understood that the conflict was no longer just about uncovering the history of the mansion. It was about confronting something that transcended human understanding, something that remained active and dangerous. As they explored the upper corridors, the mansion seemed to respond to their every movement. Doors closed on their own, paintings fell for no apparent reason, and windows creaked as if the wind were conscious. Ethan and Clara found a series of old portraits whose eyes seemed to follow every step. Among them, a photograph of the Winchester family patriarch with a stern expression and strange details. Subtle shadows around his body indicated that something more was recorded there, beyond what was visible. The conflict took on a new dimension when Ethan began to feel invisible human presences. Objects shifted, whispers arose without origin, and locked doors creaked repeatedly. Marcus, who was watching from a distance, seemed increasingly restless. He finally revealed that decades ago, a traumatic event had occurred at the mansion. A mysterious fire destroyed part of the second floor, leaving marks that were never officially recorded. The truth about the fire was linked to an attempt to contain what the Winchesters called the restless spirits, and Marcus feared that any current investigation could reactivate forces that had been dormant. Each discovery increased Ethan's internal conflict. On one hand, his curiosity and professional commitment propelled him forward. On the other, the fear of something unknown and possibly lethal began to erode his rationality. He realized that the danger was not just physical, but it was psychological. The mansion manipulated his perceptions, making it impossible to distinguish between reality and illusion. The confrontation intensified when objects began flying through the rooms, doors slammed shut, and a fleeting shadow passed through the hallway, as if the house itself wanted to expel him. Meanwhile, Clara tried to document every event, but she noticed that the mansion seemed to react to the presence of the camera and the notes. Documents disappeared, recorders turned off by themselves, and flashlights malfunctioned inexplicably. The trio realized that they weren't just investigating the past, but interacting with him, activating forces that were waiting for an opportunity to fully manifest themselves. The narrative tension increased, and each character was forced to react immediately, without time for deep reflection. The escalation of the central conflict reached its peak when Ethan discovered a secret room behind a mobile bookcase. Inside, traces of ancient rituals and cryptic symbols covered the walls. In the center, an improvised altar seemed to have been used to try to imprison or control entities that disturbed the Winchester family. There, Ethan understood that the conflict was not limited to the curiosity of a reporter, but it involved supernatural forces and generations of trauma, all rooted in the very construction of the mansion. The narrative of the conflict unfolds, showing not only the external challenges Ethan faces, but also how each obstacle reveals new layers of the mansion and the Winchester family, building increasing tension. Each action triggers unpredictable consequences, and the reader realizes that the invisible siege of the mansion is gradually closing in, making the confrontation that will come in the following sections inevitable. As Ethan, Clara, and Marcus explored the mansion, new layers of mystery began to unfold, intertwining with the main conflict. The first subplot emerged when Clara found a series of letters addressed to a missing child. The letters, dating back decades, were written by a tutor of the Winchester family, detailing the child's strange behavior and unexplained fears, and mentioning nighttime visits from figures no one could identify. Each word carried a silent weight, suggesting that the mansion not only housed ancient memories, but also it fed on the fear of the people inside it. At the same time, Ethan began to notice patterns in the supernatural events. The moving objects, the whispers, and the shadows seemed repeat specific cycles linked to old times and dates recorded in the family's diaries. This discovery added a layer of complexity. The mansion was not random in its manifestations, but had its own rhythm, almost conscious. Every step of the reporter and his companions was closely monitored, and any careless action provoked immediate responses from the house. Another subplot emerged through Marcus. The reluctant old employee began to tell his story, personal stories about the Winchester family, revealing internal conflicts and secrets kept for generations. He spoke of disputes over control of the property, silent betrayals, and dark pacts made to protect inheritances and maintain the family lineage. Each story shed light on the current behavior of the mansion and suggested that the restless spirits were not merely ghosts, but reflections of human ambitions, fears, and sins. While exploring the attic, Ethan and Clara found a locked room full of old clothes and forgotten toys, as if time had stopped there. Each object seemed to carry the presence of whoever had once owned it, making it difficult to distinguish memories from reality. Examining a torn teddy bear, Clara felt an intense energy, a mixture of sadness and anger that seemed to emanate from the wood itself. This detail reinforced the macabre atmosphere of the mansion, showing that even the most innocent objects could carry disturbing memories. The narrative tension increased when a shadowy figure began to appear in hallways and windows, visible only for fleeting moments. Ethan tried to document the apparition, but each attempt was thwarted. Cameras froze, flashlights went out, and the figure disappeared before they could record anything concrete. This element added suspense and a layer of unpredictability to the plot, reminding the reader that the danger in the Winchester mansion was not limited to the past. It was active, present, and relentless. The interaction between subplots and the main conflict became evident when Ethan discovered a secret compartment in the basement containing records of experiments conducted by the family to control supernatural manifestations. These records detailed attempts to manipulate rituals and objects, catastrophic failures, and even mysterious deaths. The historical subplot revealed that current events were direct consequences of past mistakes and choices, making each step the trio took more risky. Furthermore, small personal tensions began to emerge between the characters. Clara, increasingly emotionally involved with the mysteries of the mansion, questioned Ethan's rationality, while Marcus struggled to cope with the weight of his own memories. These dynamics added emotional layers. This showed that the danger wasn't just external. Fear, curiosity, and guilt intertwined, creating psychological obstacles that challenged their ability to collaborate. To heighten the tension, Ethan discovered a room with an old map of the property indicating secret passages and forgotten chambers. He realized that the spirits or presences that pursued them were not limited to visible areas, but moved through hidden and underground corridors. This created a sense of temporal pressure. Every movement could trigger unexpected events, and the trio needed to act quickly to avoid being caught off guard. By the end of this stage of the story, the subplots not only enriched the plot, but also directly linked to the central conflict. The secrets of the mansion, the mistakes of the past, and the traumas of the Winchester family shaped the present actions. The narrative tension remained constant, the characters evolved in their reactions, and the mansion consolidated itself as an almost conscious entity, capable of manipulating events and emotions to keep its mysteries intact. The following morning, the Winchester mansion seemed different. A dense stillness enveloped the house, as if it were waiting for something. Ethan immediately realized that they were no longer just exploring, but the house reacted to his intentions. The shadows, once subtle, now stretched down the main hallway, forming shapes that resembled human figures in positions of supplication or warning. A shiver ran down his spine. The feeling that the past was about to fully manifest itself was inevitable. While examining the attic, Ethan found a series of old portraits of children from the Winchester family, with encrypted annotations on the frames. The dates indicated deaths that occurred under mysterious circumstances and disappearances that had never been officially documented. At the center of the collection, one portrait stood out. A child not listed in birth records, with piercing eyes and a disturbing smile, as if knowing something no one else could understand. Ethan felt that this was the real one, the heart of the mansion's mystery. Clara, while leafing through the old diaries, discovered a hidden passage about a pact made by the family patriarch. The text described a sinister agreement. To protect the Winchester bloodline, certain souls would need to remain trapped within the mansion, guaranteeing power and prosperity to the family. Each word carried an almost tangible intensity, and the young historian realized that the supernatural phenomena were direct consequences of this pact. Ethan and Clara exchanged glances. Now they understood that it wasn't just a haunted mansion. They were dealing with the effects of decisions made decades ago, capable of shaping the present in a deadly way. The turning point came when Marcus, hesitantly, took Ethan and Clara to the deepest basement, a place he had never revealed before. The atmosphere was unlike anything they had ever seen. Walls covered in ancient symbols, an intense smell of earth and burning incense, and a supernatural cold that seemed to penetrate clothing and bones. In the center, a circle marked on the floor indicated which rituals had been performed there. Ethan noticed a small wooden box, sealed, with symbols similar to those found in the family diaries. Upon opening it, he found an ancient object, a medallion with unknown inscriptions, which seemed to pulse with its own energy. As soon as the medallion was touched, the mansion reacted violently. Doors slammed, glass shattered, and an invisible presence seemed to swirl through the air. Urgent whispers echoed from every corner, names, warnings, threats. Ethan realized that something inside the mansion had been awakened. Something that wasn't simply a shadow or a memory, but an active force linked to the very essence of the place. The tension reached its peak, and each character had to react quickly. Clara shouted instructions while trying to record the events, and Marcus seemed paralyzed between fear and guilt. It was at that moment that an unexpected revelation about Ethan happened. The medallion began to react to his presence in a unique way, as if it recognized something in his lineage or energy. Ethan felt a strange, almost ancestral connection that linked his own blood to the secrets of the Winchester family. He realized that his investigation was not just professional curiosity. There was a deep connection between him and the mysteries of the mansion, and that explained why he had sensed the house's presence from the beginning. The turning point not only changed the direction of the story, but also altered the protagonist's perception of himself and the danger he faced. From that event onward, things became unpredictable. Objects moved on their own. Shadows took on more defined shapes, and the feeling that the mansion was alive became palpable. Every corridor, every room seemed to conspire to help Ethan, Clara, and Marcus understand the true magnitude of the secret they were keeping. Now, the narrative tension reached its peak. It was not just about unraveling the past, but about surviving an active manifestation of the forces that the Winchesters had imprisoned. The turning point also brought moral and emotional dilemmas to the surface. Ethan began to question whether he should continue investigating or retreat, knowing that each action could worsen the situation. Clara, in turn, felt torn between historical duty and imminent danger. Marcus, carrying the guilt of generations, knew that any misstep could unleash forces that the family had tried to contain for decades. These internal conflicts intertwined perfectly with the external conflict, increasing the dramatic impact of the narrative. From that moment on, the reader realizes that the story will not be predictable. The turning point creates a new direction for the plot, introducing personal stakes, supernatural revelations, and a growing sense of urgency. The Winchester mansion ceases to be merely a setting and becomes an active force, capable of challenging the protagonists and radically transforming the story, setting the stage for the consequences and tensions that will follow in subsequent chapters. The turning point had left visible and invisible scars on the protagonists. Ethan, still holding the medallion that pulsed with an almost living energy, felt a deep unease, as if each beat of his heart echoed within the walls of the mansion. He realized that it wasn't just an old object, but a key capable of unlocking forces that the Winchesters had kept contained for decades. The responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders, and every future decision now carried unpredictable consequences. Clara, for her part, felt a mixture of fascination and terror. The diaries, letters, and portraits that had previously provided clues now seemed to take on a life of their own. Small objects moved in their presence, whispers became more audible, and shadows lengthened almost consciously. Each reaction from the mansion reinforced that the protagonists had activated something that could not be easily controlled. Knowledge did not come without a price, and each discovery increased the emotional and psychological tension. Marcus, the most affected, began to relive painful memories. He remembered the children who had disappeared, the rituals he had helped perform, and the promises the Winchesters had made to contain the restless spirits. He felt guilt and fear, aware that any wrong step could trigger tragedies similar to those that had occurred in the past. His presence served as a constant warning to Ethan and Clara, reminding them that the conflict was not merely external, but deeply personal and historical. As they explored the corridors and the deep basement, things began to emerge. Physical and symbolic manifestations of the consequences. Doors slammed shut, chandeliers swayed as if shaken by invisible hands, and shadows took on almost human forms, drawing closer without ever touching. Ethan realized that the mansion not only reacted to the trio's actions, but he acted as if he anticipated movements, almost leading them towards inevitable confrontations. Every step, every decision taken within the house had immediate ramifications, creating an atmosphere of growing tension. The pressure increased when Clara found out a series of ancient symbols marked in the corners of the main hall and in the attic. Each symbol corresponded to a ritual or practice that the Winchesters had used to imprison or control spirits. In trying to decipher the meanings, she realized that some forces were being released slowly, as if the mansion were testing the protagonist's resilience and courage. Ethan felt that each scientific or historical discovery became a risky tool, capable of changing the course of events. The medallion became a central point of contention. By using it to try to understand the patterns of the phenomena, Ethan realized that it amplified not only supernatural perceptions, but also latent human emotions, fears, guilt, and resentment intensified, making each interaction more tense and emotionally draining. The mansion seemed to feed on these emotions, becoming more active and unpredictable. Clara and Marcus also felt the influence. Small personal tensions turned into direct conflicts, and any hesitation was punished with physical and psychological manifestations. Furthermore, the investigation began to affect the rhythm of time and perception of reality. Corridors seemed to stretch endlessly. Doors led to unknown places, and objects reappeared in locations that had already been checked. Every action triggered an immediate reaction from the mansion, making it impossible for the protagonists to maintain a predictable routine. Ethan realized that with every move, the mansion shaped not only the events, but also the thoughts and emotions of those who dared to investigate it. The consequences were also reflected in the perception of imminent danger. Any attempt to leave the mansion was hampered by mysteriously locked doors, windows that wouldn't open, and corridors that changed position. The narrative tension increased, and the reader realizes that the conflict intensifies, not only due to external forces, but also due to the choices and actions of the protagonists. Each attempt to control the situation created new layers of risk, increasing the unpredictability of the story. By the end of this stage, the Winchester mansion is no longer just a setting. It becomes an almost conscious entity, with the capacity to influence, punish, and challenge the protagonists. The consequences of the turning point are in full effect: psychological tension, intensified supernatural manifestations, emotional conflicts, and life or death decisions. Ethan, Clara, and Marcus are now deeply immersed in a reality where every action generates immediate repercussions, setting the stage for arc of overcoming and growth, which will be discussed in the next topic. After the events in the basement and the supernatural manifestations, Ethan, Clara, and Marcus felt that they could no longer simply react to events. They needed to act with intelligence, courage, and strategy. Each previous step had taught them that the Winchester mansion was not merely a passive setting, but an active force, capable of manipulating emotions, space, and time. The trio began to realize that the only way to survive was to confront their fears and understand the depth of the Winchester family legacy. Ethan, who previously relied exclusively on logic and rational investigation, came to realize the need for connecting historical facts, supernatural patterns, and one's own sensory perceptions. He began to write down every phenomenon, every shadow, every sound, searching for patterns that previously seemed random. Over time, he learned to anticipate movements in the mansion and to interpret signs that could indicate danger. Rationality was transformed into a form of practical intuition, allowing him to make quick and effective decisions in situations that defy logic. Clara, whose initial curiosity had been accompanied by a certain amount of fear, began to show impressive resilience. She studied ancient diaries, letters, and symbols, deciphering patterns and correspondences between past rituals and present events. Her courage was manifested not only in exploring dangerous spaces, but also to confront the forces of the mansion directly, using historical and cultural knowledge as a tool for protection. Each discovery allowed her to help Ethan navigate the corridors and secret passages, becoming an indispensable ally in the group's survival. Marcus, on the other hand, was facing a process of emotional redemption. By confronting old memories and guilt he had carried for decades, he began to realize that he could, to actively contribute to containing or balancing the forces of the mansion. Instead of simply lamenting or hiding, he guided Ethan and Clara through secret passages, revealed forgotten symbols, and taught them ancient practices used by the family to maintain balance between the physical world and the trapped entities. The experience transformed him from someone paralyzed by fear into a temporary mentor and guardian, sharing knowledge vital for survival. The mansion, in turn, began to react to the changes in the protagonist's behavior only. When Ethan stopped reacting with excessive fear, when Clara began to face the unknown with courage, and when Marcus took active responsibility, did the phenomena begin to follow a pattern that could be understood. The shadows still moved, the whispers continued, but now they could be interpreted as signs and warnings instead of inexplicable threats. A crucial moment of overcoming occurred when the trio decided facing the central room on the second floor, where ancient symbols and ritual records were concentrated. The place exuded an intense, almost suffocating energy, and each step demanded physical and mental courage. Ethan led, but fully trusted Clara and Marcus. They worked together to use the medallion and decipher the symbols, creating an improvised ritual that balanced the energies awakened by the turning point. Fear was transformed into action, and each decision made with clarity and courage began to partially neutralize the supernatural effects that threatened to consume them. In addition to the physical and supernatural confrontation, the character's growth also occurred in emotional and psychological level. Ethan learned to trust his intuition and courage. Clara discovered the strength that knowledge and determination can generate, and Marcus found redemption by taking responsibility for events that previously paralyzed him. This gradual transformation made the protagonists better prepared to handle the climax of the story, showing that overcoming fear is not the absence of fear, but conscious action in the face of danger. As they worked together, small signs of progress began to appear. Objects stopped moving on their own, whispers faded, and the feeling of constant observation lost some of its intensity. The mansion remained active, but the balance was beginning to be restored, demonstrating that the personal transformation of the protagonists had a direct impact on the environment. By the end of this stage, the reader realizes that the trio is no longer the same group that entered the mansion. They have grown in the face of danger, overcome deep fears, and come to understand. The key to surviving and unraveling the history of the Winchester family lies in both knowledge and the courage to face the unknown. This growth prepares the ground for the next stage, the preparation for the climax, where the central conflict will be definitively confronted. With the Winchester mansion partially understood, Ethan, Clara, and Marcus knew that the decisive moment was approaching. The tension was palpable. Each corridor seemed narrower, each shadow denser, and the air held a sense of anticipation, as if the house itself were aware of the imminence of the final confrontation. They needed to organize their actions, consolidate their discoveries, and mentally prepare themselves to face the peak of the supernatural presence that inhabited the mansion. Ethan reviewed meticulous notes, correlating them. Dates, symbols, patterns of manifestation, and strategic locations. He realized that the mansion responded to intense emotions and firm decisions. Each step taken in fear exacerbated the phenomena, while calculated and courageous actions created temporary breaches of security. The medallion, still in his possession, became a central instrument, not only a link to the mysteries of the Winchester family, but a tool for partially neutralize the active forces of the house, provided it is used correctly. Clara, with her historical and cultural knowledge, began top-planning interactions with ancient symbols, discovering that they formed a kind of energy circuit within the mansion. By activating certain sequences, it was possible to reduce the effects of the restless presences and open paths previously blocked by doors and secret passages. She realized that each movement needed to be coordinated with Ethan and Marcus, requiring precise communication and mutual trust, otherwise the danger may worsen. Marcus, who knew the forgotten stories and rituals of the Winchester family, revealed crucial details about the central room on the second floor, where the events of the turning point had been concentrated. He explained that this space functioned as an energy node, fueling supernatural manifestations and keeping the souls that the Winchesters had imprisoned trapped. For the trio to survive, it would be necessary combining historical knowledge, courage, and coordinated action, restoring the balance of the space without provoking an uncontrollable reaction from the mansion. While they were planning, the mansion seemed to respond to your preparations. Doors closed softly, shadows lengthened in the corners, and small whispers seemed to guide or test the protagonists. Every element of the environment reinforced that the final confrontation would not only be physical, but mental and emotional, requiring concentration, courage, and presence of mind. Ethan felt that any hesitation could be fatal, and every decision would be crucial to the outcome. To heighten the tension, small crises began to occur. Lanterns failed, portraits fell, and the medallion vibrated almost insistently, indicating that the forces of the mansion were watching. Clara realized that they needed to synchronize their actions with precision, using Marcus's knowledge of ancient rituals and Ethan's intuition about patterns of manifestation. Each movement had to be thought out, each step calculated, so that they could move forward without provoking an uncontrolled reaction. Furthermore, the emotional tension between the protagonists reached a critical point. Ethan felt real fear for the first time of losing Clara or Marcus, and the responsibility for the medallion weighed more and more heavily on him. Clara, although determined, faced the dilemma of risking her life to activate the symbols that could contain the presences. Marcus dealt with the blame for past failures. Knowing that any mistake now could repeat past tragedies, these internal dynamics reinforced the urgency and complexity of preparing for the climax. Strategically, they decided to divide the tasks. Clara would handle the activation of the symbols. Marcus would guide the group's steps, avoiding traps and unstable spaces, and Ethan would use the medallion to stabilize the most intense manifestations. Each action would be coordinated with silent signals and constant observation, maintaining a fast pace and high tension. It was the first time they had truly faced the mansion as a unit, united and strategic group, and not as isolated individuals trying to survive. At the end of the preparations, the Winchester mansion was ready for the decisive confrontation, and the protagonists were aware that their choices would define not only their lives, but the very history of a dark legacy. The reader notices that the narrative pace has accelerated. Danger is imminent, and every element, physical, psychological, and supernatural, converges toward the climax. The tension is at its peak, setting the stage for an intense, unpredictable, and impactful final confrontation. The night was darker than usual. The Winchester mansion seemed alive, breathing with them. Every corridor creaked under the weight of decades of secrets and hidden deaths. Ethan, Clara, and Marcus moved forward with firm steps, aware that there was no turning back. The medallion pulsed intensely in Ethan's hands, as if sensing the peak of the energy contained within the house. The air was charged with electricity and tension, and shadows contorted across the walls, forming figures that seemed like ancient memories, not just ghosts. Upon arriving at the central room on the second floor, they felt the intensity of no energy that Marcus had mentioned. Ancient symbols covered the floor and walls, some burned by time, others almost intact, and all vibrated with an invisible force. Ethan noticed that the medallion reacted unpredictably, pulsing faster, releasing waves that made the chandeliers sway violently and raised a current of cold air. He felt a presence before him, something invisible yet palpable, a force that seemed to observe and measure his every action. The climax began when Clara started activating the symbols, following the ancient records. Each of her gestures unleashed an immediate reaction. Doors slammed, paintings fell, whispers echoed in unison, and shadows condensed into human forms that seemed to emerge from the very history of the mansion. Ethan realized that it wasn't enough to just react. It was necessary. Stay calm and direct the energy of the medallion to balance the phenomena. Every second mattered, and any hesitation could be fatal. Marcus, guiding the movements, noticed that certain areas of the room were unstable. One of the shadows advanced towards Ethan, but Marcus intervened, blocking the path with improvised objects and shouting quick instructions. The mansion reacted with increasing intensity. A gust of wind blew the curtains, extinguished lanterns, and made the floor creak as if trying to open gaps beneath them. The trio realized that each demonstration was directly linked to their emotions and coordination. The balance between fear and courage would determine the success or failure of the confrontation. At the height of the climax, Ethan felt an intense connection to the medallion. A fleeting vision flashed through his mind, the patriarch of the Winchester family, making the pact, imprisoning entities, and creating a cycle of pain that perpetuated itself for generations. He understood that his own lineage, as they had discovered before, was intertwined with the secrets of the house. The revelation brought clarity and strength. They weren't just facing the mansion, but also breaking an ancestral cycle. While Ethan focused the medallion's energy, Clara completed the sequence of symbols, and Marcus kept the shadow's presence under control. The atmosphere seemed to tremble, and ancient voices mingled with the whispers of the wind. The tension reached its peak when a larger, almost solid shadow emerged in the center of the room, taking over. A shape reminiscent of the Winchester patriarch, the entity advanced, but Ethan raised the medallion, releasing a wave of energy that seemed to repel the presence and create a protective barrier around them. The final battle was a delicate balance between action and reaction. Shadows receded and advanced, doors closed and opened, objects floated in the air, and the ground seemed unstable. Every movement of the protagonists altered the flow of energy, and the feeling of imminent danger was constant. Ethan realized that the climax wasn't just physical, but mental and spiritual. Maintaining concentration, overcoming fear, and working in harmony with Clara and Marcus was the only way to survive and neutralize the effects of the mansion. After moments of extreme tension, the trio managed to complete the correct sequence of symbols and direct the medallion's energy. The patriarch's shadow began to dissipate, as if the cycle that imprisoned souls was being broken. The mansion trembled one last time, gates and windows banged simultaneously, and then silence filled the space. Ethan, Clara, and Marcus fell to their knees, exhausted, realizing that they had survived and altered the fate of the house. The climax not only resolved the central conflict, but also showcased the protagonist's transformation. Ethan went from a rational, curious individual to someone capable of acting with courage and intuition. Clara became a brave investigator, balancing knowledge and action. Marcus found redemption, confronting his fears and making a decisive contribution. The mansion, though still imposing, he no longer displayed the same intense hostility, and the dark legacy of the Winchester family was beginning to unravel, ending a cycle of suffering that had lasted for generations. The reader realizes that the climax was intense, unpredictable, and unique, showing not only the struggle against external forces, but also the internal evolution of the characters. Every action, every reaction, and every decision had direct consequences, making the resolution consistent with the entire narrative built up to that point. Silence fell over the Winchester mansion. The tension that had hung over the house for decades seemed to have dissipated, though not completely. Ethan, Clara, and Marcus remained motionless for a few seconds, absorbing the reality. They had survived the climax and altered the supernatural patterns of the house. The medallion still rested in Ethan's hands, but his pulse had slowed, now calmer, as if recognizing that the energy of the place was, at least partially, under control. The corridors, once filled with menacing shadows, now presented only heavy silences and distant echoes. Doors that closed on their own remained stable, and the walls seemed less oppressive. Every object had been moved, but no longer in a hostile manner. The mansion was not destroyed, but recognized the restored balance by the protagonists. Clara walked slowly through the rooms, observing the symbols and diaries, realizing that the knowledge acquired had not only allowed for survival, but had also helped two breaking patterns that have fueled fear and suffering for generations. Marcus silently revisited each event he had witnessed in his mind. He felt relief and a sense of redemption. The past failings of the Winchester family, which had haunted him so much, now had a resolution. Although the traumas and memories of the past remained, the possibility of breaking the cycle of suffering and rebuilding the narrative of the house was real. Each of the three protagonists understood that the mansion was not just a place of terror, but an entity linked to human choices, fears, and unresolved histories. Ethan, contemplating the medallion, realized that his personal transformation had been as important as neutralizing the forces of the mansion. Once rational and curious, he now understood the importance of courage, intuition, and collaboration in the face of the unknown. Clara, beside him, experienced a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. The knowledge and courage she had demonstrated had been crucial in confronting forces that seemed impossible to control. Marcus, finally at peace with his historical responsibility, knew that the journey had given meaning to years of guilt and silence. The conclusion made it clear that, although the mansion remained an old place, laden with mysteries and memories, the immediate threat was contained. The story of the Winchesters, marked by secrets, tragedies, and dark pacts, was beginning to be reinterpreted by those who dared to confront its horrors. Ethan, Clara, and Marcus had broken physical, emotional, and supernatural barriers, showing that balance and overcoming adversity depend on courage, intelligence, and unity. As they left the mansion, the trio looked at the house one last time. The shadows remained, but now seemed to observe with respect and recognition. The feeling that something had permanently changed hung in the air. The story's conclusion demonstrated victory over fear, resolution of ancestral conflicts, and the power of conscious action. Faced with forces that transcend time, the reader realizes that, although not everything has been explained, the narrative delivers an emotionally satisfying and coherent resolution. concluding the protagonists' arcs and showing the consequences of their actions in a powerful way. Months had passed since the night Ethan, Clara, and Marcus confronted the Winchester mansion. The house remained imposing, but its terror had been contained. Shadows still moved, but with a respectful silence. Ethan kept the medallion safe, now more as a reminder of courage than as an instrument of power. Clara continued researching the family's historical mysteries, while Marcus dedicated himself to recording old stories, ensuring that the mistakes and secrets of the past would not be forgotten or repeated. The mansion, now partially at peace, remained a symbol of stories that could never be completely erased. If you felt drawn into the mystery of the Winchester mansion and the stories that span generations, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what scared or intrigued you the most. What secret would you dare to face? Subscribe to follow new macabre and surprising stories where every detail can reveal something that no one has dared to tell before. And don't forget to turn on notifications. New investigations and terrifying accounts are always arriving, waiting for brave readers like you. After all, the closer you get to the mystery, the closer you will be to the truth.